Welcome. My name is Lynn Kronberger, Chief Development Officer here at WAMU. As a public media organization, our mission is to connect listeners and members like you to each other and around the world. Public radio works because listeners and members who value the service step up and give back. The support for public media at WAMU comes from the public. Support from listeners and members is also our most reliable and important source of funding, especially right now. This author series would not be possible without your support. So if you are enjoying this special author series, please consider making an additional donation at dianerehm.org/give. Just so you know, this event is being recorded. Closed captioning is available. Just click the button on your screen. And now let's start the conversation with the host of our author series, Diane Rehm.
Thank you, Lynn, and welcome to all of you to the September meeting of my virtual book club. We're going to discuss the House of Broken Angels. It's the 2018 best-selling novel by Luis Alberto Urrea, a master storyteller of life on the border. Here, Urrea paints a portrait of a big, messy Mexican-American family as they celebrate their patriarch's birthday and grapple with his imminent death. It's sad, it's funny, and in its own way, very political. Joining me today, Gustavo Arellano, a columnist for the Los Angeles Times and author of Taco, USA, How Mexican Food Conquered America. Elisabeth Egan is editor at the New York Times Book Review and author of the novel A Window Opens. And John Alba Cutler, Associate Professor of English at the University of California, Berkeley, and author of Ends of Assimilation, the Formation of Chicano Literature. We will be taking your questions throughout our discussion. You can type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And of course, we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. How wonderful to have you all with me for what I know is going to be a great discussion. Gustavo, I'm going to start with you. This is very much a family story. How would you describe this family?
Your quintessential Mexican family in Southern California. So humongous, sprawling, one where not everyone's actually related by blood, but you're still nevertheless a part of it. Successful also. You own your home. You have, different walks of life. Some people are a little bit more successful than others, but when you have these parties, then everyone's equal. There's some sort of like hierarchy, yes, with like the patriarch or whatnot, but still the daughters are cutting down the patriarch, the cousins, everyone. And so what I love about the House of Broken Angels, I remember when I read it, and full disclosure, I'm not much of a fiction fan because I'm a reporter. So reporters, I like reading sociological treatises from the 1500s, but I read this in one day. I could not put it down because so much of it was relatable to my own life as a child of Mexican immigrants, but also it was just this big rollicking mess. Oh my God. It's every single sentence crackles with hilarity, poignancy, and just damn good writing.
Elisabeth, how did you react to the book in general?
I have to say pretty similarly to Gustavo, I am a regular fiction reader. I'd never have read a sociological treatise from the 1500s in my entire life.
You're missing out.
So the House of Broken Angels might be where our Venn diagrams overlap. But I think what really struck me about the book from the get-go was the collision of sadness and joy that we find. So it begins with the funeral of the main character, Big Angel's mother. And then we quickly transition from the funeral to this birthday party for this man we know is dying. And there's a lot of sadness, but there's also so much celebration and joy, and the kind of cacophony of the younger generation in the other room all playing video games together, and the older generation bickering, and everybody congregating around tables that are groaning with all kinds of food, not necessarily the food you expect. And you immediately, as a reader, feel drawn into this incredible festival of humanity. And even though it wasn't a place I had ever been before, I don't believe I've ever been to San Diego. I come from a pretty large Irish family, so our celebrations have a kind of different, slightly different vibe, but some of the same political dynamics. It felt so familiar to me. I immediately felt I wanted to join all the gatherings that were happening in the book.
You know, John, it's so interesting to talk about the sadness and the joy, because Big Angel, who is the patriarch of the family, is dying, but he was so looking forward to his birthday party, and then his mother dies, and all the attention goes there. And though he loved his mother a lot, he's sort of sad that the attention is being taken away from him. He's got to get ready for this funeral before he can celebrate his own birthday.
I think one of the reasons that the book feels so familiar to a lot of readers when they encounter it is exactly those kinds of complicated emotions that we feel towards family members. So it's not just, you know, I think you're right. You know, Big Angel, he wants the attention and the celebration for his birthday, and he feels, you know, this sort of resentment and then guilt about his resentment. But then there's also all the complications of his feelings towards his mother, his feelings towards his deceased father, all of the complicated emotions of all of his children's feelings towards him. And I think people, readers, identify with that really strongly, right? That there are people, for all of us, that we love desperately, even, you know, recognizing all of their flaws, the ways that they've hurt us, the ways that they continue to hurt us. And so the way, you know, when we cling to them, when we look to them, it's with a lot of ambivalence. And I think that's something that a lot of readers will, I know at least I identified really strongly with that.
Had you ever read any of Urrea's books prior to this one? He's written some 17 other books.
I think I have maybe read all of Urrea's books. There might be one or two that I've missed here or there. I've taught many of them. It's not an understatement to say that he's the foremost chronicler of the experience of the border. And what I think, to me, makes him stand apart really is a sense of the full gamut of human experiences and emotions that migrants and Mexican American families experience, so that they're not solely defined by their migration status or a sense of being marginalized or oppressed, right? That there's everything that any human family, any human individual is experiencing is being experienced fully by all of these characters. And I think that runs through all of Urrea's fiction and his poetry and his nonfiction.
Yeah, he always makes sure to portray us that we're not victims. Look, we might be in some really bad situations. We're definitely discriminated against on the border. This is the Southwest, which the United States, remember, stole it from Mexico 170 some years ago. But we're not, his characters do not consider themselves to be victims. So even the House of Broken Angels, okay, Big Angel's dying of cancer. He is just very, he's reflecting on a lifetime of sins. And one of the things I like about, in his mind, every day he's got to try to forgive a sin that he did in the past. But at the same time, he's like, yeah, I did it. I'm not going to be racked with too much guilt because it was part of my life. It's what I lived. And even though life could have been better than me, at the end, I'm still proud of it. And all his different characters, whether you're, the half-white brother, Little Angel, who's now a total academic, a professor of English literature, no less, from up north, to then I especially like there's such a sprawling family. I'm trying to remember, was it one of his nephews who's the head of a Mexican death metal band, which if you know the border, Mexican death metal is a total thing. When I started writing, I used to cover that all the time. So I'm reading these characters like, yes, these are people. And I know like other people might think like, oh, how quaint. Like people are giving humanity to Mexican Americans. So where far too often in literature, they're always portrayed as perpetual pathetic victims. But Urrea's like, no, we are here. We're humans. Hello, folks. We're humans. And that itself is such a politically powerful thing to do and to write.
And Elisabeth, what did you think about the relationship between Big Angel and Little Angel?
I think of all the many relationships in the book, that was the one that fascinated me the most. The fact that I think I felt the most comfortable in Little Angel's viewpoint because he was the outsider coming in, sort of half part of the family, half maybe not a part of the family, and he's viewing it with that outsider's lens. So he felt like a very comfortable tour guide for me. I loved his ambivalence about some of the kind of chaos and noise of it all, but also his real, what I thought was very genuine yearning to be one of the family and to be accepted by his brother. And that also to me kind of went hand in hand in a funny way with Big Angel's approach to the next generation of the family. He's both pleased by how American they are, proud of them, but also sort of disgusted by how they don't know Spanish and how they maybe don't have the same respect that he would have had for his elders. And so those two dynamics with Big Angel in the middle, Little Angel on one side, and then the grandchildren on the other, I found really fascinating.
I think we should explain that Big Angel and Little Angel have different mothers because Big Angel's father ran off, left his wife, and began to have a relationship with a non-Hispanic white woman. And the result was Little Angel. That created really not just a little, but a lot of tension in that family as a whole, John.
Yeah, when Gustavo at the beginning said this is a quintessential Mexican-American family, I thought that one of the things that really resonated with my own experience coming from a mixed family was the way that racial and cultural politics kind of run right through the middle of the family. And then they get all mixed up with just personal relationships and personal choices. So, there's Little Angel's got all this anxiety about being whiter than the rest of the family. Perla, Big Angel's wife, has all this anxiety about being darker skinned and the way that she feels, some discrimination from other members of the family. And then, there's all that gets kind of confused with the natural resentments they feel about the choices that Big Antonio made to leave their mother, the choice that Big Angel made to adopt Perla's children. So all of the kind of the colorism that besets Mexican American communities, the anxieties about assimilation, language acquisition, they all get mixed up with these personal feelings. And I think what's really beautiful about the novel is that it imagines reconciliation happening, even despite, or maybe in some instances because of these deep divisions that are caused by forces sometimes out of their control and then choices that they've made.
But surely this is not true of just Mexican families. It's true in a sense about all families with these kinds of tensions and disagreements and feelings, not only political, but vocational. I mean, with the one son, little Angel, as a professor, and the others there in that small town in San Diego, Elizabeth, so different.
So different, and yet connected over the things that we all know to be sort of the stuff of life: birth, death, food, music, love. I was surprised by how rarely there's a family tree that is printed at the back of the book. Normally, I'm a real enthusiast of books about big sprawling families, and normally in those kind of novels, the family tree is printed at the front of the book.
At the front, right.
But I loved the decision to run it at the end because I didn't stumble on it until the end.
I didn't either.
And I found I didn't really need it. At first, I tried to keep close track of, wait, how is this person related to the next? And then I just let the book wash over me like a wave. It didn't, the really important relationships were in stone in my head, and the rest of them were just these wonderful visitors who came on and off screen.
Well, I have a confession to make. I read this book twice, and it wasn't until the second time I read it, with the help of that family tree at the back, that I finally got it. And Gustavo, how much did you rely on that family?
I still don't know who's related to who, and I don't care because it is the De La Cruz family, and this is coming again. It's something that I saw. The only thing I would say it's fiction. You didn't have the cousins. I mean, you had all this reconciliation. Sadly, in real life, it doesn't work. I have cousins who haven't spoken to each other in 25 years because they're dumb. They're absolutely dumb. And so Urrea's so forgiving of his characters and everything so much. And I think it's like an aspiration, a good aspiration to have. But like in real life, okay, like what was it? I mean, even I'll give you an example of my own family. And another thing that Urrea does so great, like he gets down the nicknames. Like there's three types of Mexican nicknames. You have the one that describes them. So, what was her name? La preferida or la princesa. Yeah. You have one. Okay, that's someone like describing who they are. Then you have like something that shortens a person's name. So you have, what was it? Lupe. Lupe is going to be short for Guadalupe. And then you're going to have, just random things like that. So I'm reading all these nicknames. I'm like, yep, same family. To the point where I have a tia. Her name, like I've always known an aunt. I've always known her mi tia Chayo. Only a couple of years ago, I finally realized what her real name was, Rosario. And it's a shortening of that. So this big sprawl, I'm like, no, I mean, sometimes you want to pay attention for the plot point, but this is taking over basically over a week, so to speak. So let's just see where these characters take me. And if I have a question, I actually didn't, just very tellingly, I didn't even realize you had that family map until I picked up a paperback copy because I can't find my hardcover one. So I found them like, oh, this is pretty cool. It's kind of funny with the lines and all that.
Absolutely. Here's a question from Marianne. She says, I would have liked a Spanish-English dictionary in the back of the book for the Spanish terms and phrases I used. I think I understood the meaning, but would have checked the dictionary to make sure. What I did every time I came across one of those Spanish words was to go to Google because I wanted to understand what was being said when I couldn't figure it out in the context of the sentence itself. Most of the time I could, but there were some places I didn't understand. That probably didn't happen to you, John.
No, not really, but what I did find a lot of interest in the way Urrea navigated language in the novel, because I think, Latinx authors, they take a lot of different routes towards thinking about, the significance of Spanish, how to present Spanish language, who their readership is. Urrea is really smart. He's been doing this a long time. So I think this is a novel that, on the one hand, is widely accessible. I think usually there's contextual clues that help people, who might be English-only readers. But he also, what I love about this novel is he gives enough for, I think, Mexican or Latinx readers who do come from Spanish language backgrounds, that they can feel that they have maybe a little bit of like inside baseball relationship to the novel. And my favorite example of it is near the end of the novel when the family sings Las Mañanitas de David, which is the traditional happy birthday song in Mexican families, and it's not translated, but the lyrics are so beautiful and so appropriate to the situation of saying farewell to Big Angel. That last verse, Qué linda está la mañana en que vengo a saludarte. Venimos todos con gusto y placer a
You got to
felicitar.
sing it though, man. You got to
No,
sing it. You can't just read the
Please,
lyrics.
John, you have to.
My family will never.
Qué lindo está la mañana. And I'll just give you that.
How
Thank you,
beautiful is the
Gustavo.
morning in which I come to greet you. We come with happiness and pleasure to celebrate you. And I think that's just so appropriate and such a beautiful way of saying goodbye, really, to Big Angel as well as celebrating him.
A question I have, and I agree with everything each of you has said thus far. What does this book teach us who are not Hispanic Americans? What does it teach us about those who have crossed the border, some of whom illegally, some of whom legally? What should we be taking away from this book? My father came to this country in 1907 from Lebanon, but his skin was fair. There were no prohibitions against his coming to this country. What does this book tell us about how we view, or maybe should view, the other, no matter who the other is? Elisabeth.
I would say on the most basic level that there is no other. It should go without saying, but I think unfortunately in today's climate, it doesn't always go without saying that we are all human and we all share a certain humanity. And I think for me, the most powerful reminder of that, in a strange way, were the little italicized bits that are woven throughout the chapters where we learn. It takes you, they're just a few words each. It takes you a minute to figure out what they are, but they're the things that Big Angel will miss when he dies. And it's the smell of eggs frying. It's watching his wife put on a pair of stockings. It's just these tiny very human moments that you can relate to, whether you're born in Staten Island, New York, as I was, or whether you're born in Mexico. Or to me, those italicized words they contained that reminder that those things connect us all.
How about you, Gustavo?
Again, that hello, they're really nothing different. Just the only difference is the fact that they don't have legal status and you do. That's it. But otherwise, what do we have? We have an undocumented soldier who went off and fought the Iraq War. Like I mean, how much more American can you get than someone is putting themselves out there to defend the freedoms of this country? You have a dreamer, a college student who is younger. Then you have Big Angel himself, came here without papers and was able to buy a house, was able to be a freaking computer technician for the city of San Diego, got that middle class, boring suburban life that everyone's supposed to get. And guess what? They're not boring and they still kept their Mexican identity. And then it slowly rains down on the Americanisms the more you stay here. And he talks right at the very beginning of the book, like he still can't pronounce English words the way they're supposed to. Like, just what was a very, very literally the first page right here. Let me 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not going to find it right now. Sorry. But again, and I cannot overstate the fact that just how basic this novel is. At the end, it really is basic. It's my life. It's something my dad came to this country in the trunk of Chevy in 1969. My entire life, I've known people who are undocumented, people who are not. I never really considered the only time, but what it also shows though, that small little division can still have profound effects on someone's life. So, the dreamer, she still has to live in this country without papers. She's not a citizen. And so it really, hopefully, would make the non-Latino, non-border living reader think like, this is unjust. This is unfair. Urrea does a classic journalism example of show, don't tell. He doesn't have to tell us that our current immigration status is unjust. He shows us by the lives of these people.
Yeah, I think you really hit at one of this sort of paradox in the novel, that on the one hand, legal status, citizenship, when you migrated, it sort of doesn't matter. It's incidental to the full picture of who you are as a person. And yet, on the other hand, it matters a lot, right? It makes material difference in your life opportunities. And I think for me, Lalo is the best example of that, right? He serves in the Iraq War. He thinks he's a citizen his whole life, and then he gets stopped at the border and deported to Tijuana, and it sort of transforms his life. It stops him in his tracks in a way. So I think the novel for me, it's really successful in showing those two things, as well as the way the borders really changed over time, become much less porous, much more hardened. The consequences of that for Mexico.
Yeah, my dad came to this country in trunk of a Chevy, paid $50 to be able to do it, like nothing. They just waved my dad in because there was a hippie chick from Huntington Beach who was driving the Chevy where my dad and 2 other people were. And I found the word. And Big Angel, instead of pronouncing it wait, he pronounces it gwait, which, hey, at least it's not way, right?
But in the case of the young man who served in the armed forces, wasn't that a promise given, that is, of citizenship, and then taken away?
It's based on a real story. I mean, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of veterans who served going back to Vietnam, and they served in this country without legal status. The military said, "Hey, come on, we'll help you out," and then it didn't happen. Then some of these veterans, they got convicted of crimes, and because they weren't citizens, they were deported back. Never mind that they lived almost their entire lives in this country. Never mind that they fought for this country. A lot of citizens have not served, and yet you have these people, and it's a complete. I know the Biden administration has been trying to help in like regulating their status or doing something. It's the least they can do. And then the worst part about it, and Urrea doesn't get into this, but you've had people like one of the first casualties of the Iraq War was one of these soldiers from Guatemala, from where I'm here in Orange County, California. Our first casualty of the Iraq War was Jose Angel Garibay, who did not get his citizenship until it was presented to his mother on the day of his funeral.
So all through the book, through this family, you are hearing Urrea's comments about the politics of the United States. I mean, he weaves it in so beautifully and in such both a subtle and a very direct fashion. But I want to move on to something else, and that is the way some of these men behave. Some of them behave fairly brutally and without, what shall I say, kindness toward other men, but most especially toward women. Did you feel that way, Elisabeth?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Definitely. I mean, even just Big Angel's view of Perla, the love of his life, arguably, debatably, there were times where I just thought, you know, it was definitely not brutal in her case, but sometimes troublesome. Definitely not troublesome enough not to, to deter me from the book. I loved it, but I definitely was bothered by that piece of it and by some of the violence. But I also knew that was just part of the story.
Gustavo, from a male point of view?
Sadly, I was not surprised by any of it. Hey, look, we idolize our fathers, we idolize our uncles, and we tolerate, if you will, the machismo, the toxic machismo, if you will, that they have exhibited towards the women in our lives. And look, and you do this as a fact that you're the beneficiary of this machismo. So I'll give you an example. I'm the oldest of four. My sisters and my youngest brother could tell all sorts of things to my dad, who's widowed. And my dad will not pay attention to them at all. And when they're just exasperated and banging their heads on the wall, they'll call me, Gustavo, you need to talk to my dad. And I go in there and just with one word, my dad will just like be subservient to me. And I tell my siblings get mad at me about that. I'm like, look, I'm not agreeing with this, but we just have to deal with this while we're alive. And the point for us who are born here in the United States is to take the good that we learn from the men in our lives that come directly from these small towns in Mexico and all that, and just eliminate all the bad. And I think that's what Urrea does. He shows it is not an apologist for it, but says, look, this is a thing. It is what it is. But then in the younger generations, like with Little Angel, they start thinking like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and I'm not going to be like that. But while it's very much a matter of respect, and he leaves it up to the reader to say, like, is the family deluded for condoning this, or is there like a longer game strategy for that? And at least, and the best part for me, at least, there is redemption with Big Angel, because he realizes like, okay, I was wrong. Like, maybe I shouldn't have been like this. He's still very macho. He's still very proud of it. But as his days are slowly starting to twirl around, he's like, well, I don't think that was right. I mean, I don't make apologies for it, but I think I was actually in the wrong all these 70 years about my status as a man in my family's life.
John?
Yeah, I thought there were two aspects of the novel that I see as weaknesses, and it's a novel that I love, but one of them was that it has this sort of shifting narrative perspective, right, where you're sort of inside the consciousness of different characters. And I think that Urrea tries at certain points to have moments for Minnie and Perla and La Gloriosa, but they're few and far between, so that the masculine perspective kind of dominates the novel. And even though these are, it's Little Angel and Big Angel, and they're trying to aspire towards a more tender and kind masculinity, they dominate so much of the novel that the portrait of women, for me, is unconvincing. And then the second aspect that I thought, Gustavo was talking about how some of the reconciliation didn't totally ring true. And for me, the reconciliation with Indio, the non-gender conforming son at the end of the novel, that didn't ring true to me, because I thought it was a novel that it didn't really take on anything outside of sort of heterosexual sexuality. And I thought there was a chance there for Indio to really challenge some of the really kind of fundamental values of that family. And instead, it was just sort of, okay, we're friends again, you know.
Can you talk more about Indio? I was fascinated by his character.
I want to know more about him. I wish that I could know more about him. One of the things I wanted to know about him was why he carried the nickname Indio. And you know, there's so many reasons that could be, right? Because there seemed to be like an alignment between this kind of racialized nickname and his his non-normative gender presentation and sexuality. And we don't really get his backstory. We get that he resents Big Angel for trying to be his father figure and for being too tough on him. But we don't ever get really from his point of view, choices that he's making or how he's feeling about his own identity. And I want more of that. Maybe Urrea will write a sequel from Indio's point of view.
Do you think he was involved in activities that Big Angel simply did not approve of, or was it just because Big Angel had treated Indio as Big Angel, had been treated by his father with brutality as a young boy? What do you think, Gustavo?
I think it's a bit of both. Having knowledge of situations like this, especially in these very macho families, most people could strive for, sadly, is tolerance. Just a tolerance that you're alive, but we're not going to embrace who you are. Things are slowly changing with this younger generation who's not taking it. So I'm talking about from the vantage point of someone in my 40s, knowing people who were gender nonconforming, who were at the just LGBT, but still, with their own, their own identities. And a lot of them were just castigated. They just went off and like never to be thought of again until the funeral. And you don't talk to them at the funeral. I agree. I agree with John that there's not much of a vantage point from the women. They're very underdeveloped characters. Frankly, they're very sexualized. So it's a very, very macho book. It is again, it's a story about a patriarch. The patriarchy, sadly, has femininity in the Mexican patriarchy in a very specific thing, a very specific cubbyhole for them to be using at one point or another. But I wonder if Urrea did that on purpose. Like, I wonder if he said, okay, this is going to be, yes, a big sprawling novel, but this is also an examination of what patriarchy and what machismo does to these families. What are, maybe he celebrated it a little bit more than he should have, or maybe did, or not saying that, more like maybe he should have been a tad bit more condemning. But frankly, this book shouldn't be read not just by, everyone. And of course it's a bestseller, but it should really be assigned, I would say, in high schools, like 9th grade, and taught to specifically Mexican-American boys and say, like, look, these are your families. They're going to love it. They're absolutely going to love it. But think about it. Like, with the teacher, like, is this really how manhood should be manifested? I remember reading Bless Mi Ultima by the late, Rodolfo Anaya in 9th grade. And I just remember it blew away my mind of so many things, but that's a whole other conversation.
I have an exercise that I love to perform while I'm reading, where I think this is going to seem like a tangent, but I am not a fan of Catcher in the Rye or Salinger. And I love to imagine if we were to take Catcher in the Rye out of the high school curriculum and replace it with another book, what would it be? And I'm always thinking, like, I never read James Baldwin in high school. I have all these gaps in my high school.
See, I love Catcher in the Rye, and as a Mexican kid, the alienation resonated so much with a Mexican nerd like me. But that's a whole other conversation.
Gustavo, we can take this offline. I'm the most basic person around. I was basic before basic was a term, and I wasn't alienated in high school. So I couldn't relate. I thought there was a sexism in that book, even at the age of 15 in 1988. Maybe my math is wrong, but anyway, I would love to put I'd love to use the House of Broken Angels in my Catcher in the Rye swap.
Totally.
Great suggestion. Here's an email from Shanti who says, and we touched on this earlier, what was the significance of the type of food served at Big Angel's party, specifically not traditional Mexican food? Like Little Angel, I was disappointed in the hot dogs, Chinese food, and pizza. John?
Well, Shanti, you're going to have to talk to my tias about whether Chinese food is traditional Mexican food, because I think I did have a maybe agreement with you about that. I loved that detail. I thought for two reasons, actually.
It's
that was
real.
one of the things, one of the moments that I did like with Perla was her refusal to cook anymore. And that seemed of a piece with that, right? The reason we're doing this is I'm not going to spend the rest of my life cooking for you in the kitchen. And I thought that was one of those moments that was, convincing and moving. But also that just seemed totally real to me, with my Mexican family. Like actually in grad school, I had a couple of friends who were Asian American from different national backgrounds, and we once planned this party for our department, and it's a little embarrassing to admit now, but we catered it with Boston Market, and we realized that we'd all come from these sort of second generation immigrant families that just loved like American Thanksgiving food. We really had strongly identified with that. And so I loved it. The KFC, the Chinese food, that just felt totally familiar to me.
A quick example as well, just because that part so resonated with me, and I was laughing when Urrea was describing the KFC, the table setup. When it was my mi tío Santos's 70th birthday a couple years ago, they had this sumptuous feast with moles, with tacos, like a Mexican buffet, but with amazing food. And yeah, the aunts, my tias, are amazing cooks, but they didn't want to cook for that because we're gonna have like 600 people there. And then my abuelita, who's now 99, back then she was 95, she tells everyone, we got to get pizzas. We got to get pizzas. They're like, what? No. We're like trying to honor our culture. Pizza's not it. But she's like, look, my great grandchildren, they don't want this food. They want pizza. So we get a cousin, gets a whole bunch of pizzas. The first thing to run out were the pizzas, and all my tios and tias, they were eating the pizza. So I appreciate the, even Little Angels' idea that, I want something, that honors the ancestors, that honors la familia. Because, hey, that food's ultimately better than pizza. But when it gets down to it, pizza's damn good. Of course, we had salsa for the pizza, so.
So Urrea himself has said the subtitle of the book should be Go to Hell, Donald. So as in Donald Trump. How do you see Donald Trump in this book?
Not really, actually. I would have not thought of Trump. I mean, obviously, the publication of it was, again, and Urrea, by the way, is very, very political, and it has been very outspoken, even before the Trump era. Excuse me. But it was just a way for him to say, this is the people that you're trying to alienate. This is how American immigration policy has complicated these lives of these people. But guess what? As much complications that you might throw at them, they still thrive. They still survive. They still weep and cry and eat and laugh and love and do all these things. So in that sense, it's like a big, I'm not going to say it here. I would cuss, Diane, but I'm not going to cuss right here. But it's like, like the old Italian thing, going like that to Donald Trump. That's what I see it as.
John, on the flip side of Big Angel's repenting, he also catalogs his gratitude. You wanted to read a passage about that.
I did. This is from early in the novel, when it's first presented to readers, this journal that he starts keeping at the encouragement of what we later find out it's his priest, but he's presented at first as a friend. Every day he found his gratitudes more ridiculous, but they were many, and they reproduced like desert wildflowers after rain. He could not stop himself. His daughter had to buy him a second, then a third set of tiny notebooks. Wildflowers after rain. The heart breaks open and little bright seeds fall out. Before that, he hadn't realized he was a poet among his many other attributes. And I think what I loved so much about that, this is a book that is really a lot about what does it mean to live a good life? And I'm hearing in my mind the echo of Donald Trump on the campaign trail saying they're not sending their best. And this is a portrait of a Mexican family of broken people, right? It's the house of broken angels. But all of humanity is broken, right? And it's a book that encourages us to see the beauty and the poetry inside that brokenness. And that passage really captures that for me. Big Angel seeing that in himself, right? It's a real moment where he can look back and see a life that maybe in some respects he might think, well, I didn't achieve everything. I failed in some ways, but still it's a good life. It's a beautiful life that I've had.
Elisabeth, do you want to add to that?
I could not agree more. I absolutely love that passage, first of all. And I think life consists of little moments. And this is a book of little moments that sort of stitch together the brokenness of this family and prove that nobody is really broken. And that idea is incredibly moving to me. I kept thinking of that scene in, I don't know if any of you have visited, have reread or seen Our Town recently.
Oh yeah, of course.
I fear that Our Town is a little out of vogue at the moment, but it's one of my favorite plays. And there's that part where the characters are all in folding chairs and in what I guess is supposed to be the afterlife or heaven, and they're all talking about the things they miss, the sound of the bells at night and the sound of the train going by. And even though I think Thornton Wilder is writing about a very different world than the one that we're encountering here, it was those little moments that were so familiar to me and so poignant, and also so funny and full of the joy we were talking about at the beginning.
So from your point of view, John, you feel that passage really helps us to see and understand Big Angel better, or to broaden the perspective to what we all know about ourselves, that in some ways we all are broken, but there are things that we can continue to love and cherish.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And what I think is, additionally about that passage that's so important is it gives a mechanism for seeing the beauty in an existence that from another point of view might look immiserated or marginalized or purely minoritized. And the mechanism for seeing it is poetry, it's language, it's culture. So there's a sense that passage it's sort of meta-narrative. It's encouraging us to see Big Angel as an artist, and then we can think about the art of this novel and how it's opening up a window into seeing these characters differently as well.
Gustavo, there is a gangbanger in this book, the mariachis. You have all kinds of people who are not only part of the family, but part of the entire community. And surely that is what we're seeing in this world today.
Oh yeah, cholos. I have cholo cousins. Who doesn't have cholo cousins at this point? Mariachis. You have mariachis just randomly peppering the soundtrack of weekends and barrios across Southern California. I always love it where I live. You step out on Saturday night, down the street, you have a mariachi. So that's your classical traditional music. The other side of the street, you have a conjunto norteño. So that's going to be the accordions. Somewhere else, you have the banda sinaloenses, so the umpa, the brass bands. And then someone's spinning house music, like DJ style music. And that's your Saturday night. Like you have a whole soundtrack right there, just kicking it in your backyard. Again, Urrea points out, like, it's interesting, Elisabeth, that you mentioned our town, because it's kind of an our town in a way, in the sense that, what Thornton Wilder did was like he made a play where anywhere it could be staged anywhere. In fact, he had those spaces like this is in Anaheim, California, or this is like in Brighthampton, New Hampshire. I just made that up right now. But it's like, so Urrea does this, like, yes, this is, by the way, a very scene specific novel. It is so San Diego in so many ways that as I'm not a native of San Diego, but I've spent enough time in San Diego to see those markers. So it'd be fascinating to see how San Diegans react to it. But at the same time, you could put this at any middle class or even working class Latino neighborhood in the United States, and it's going to resonate. Just, you're going to swap out the mariachi for salsa on the East Coast. Maybe someplace instead of the 67 Chevys, you're going to be driving a Dodge Challenger nowadays because of Fast and Furious. The more things change, the more places are different, the more they're still the same and universal.
For everyone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everyone.
You left out the Smiths, Gustavo.
The Smiths, Morrissey and the Smiths, although he's kind of problematic now, but still the music is all there. Like there's a soundtrack, there's the markers, especially for Mexican American life, but all cultures do have them for sure. And not just all cultures, going back to what Elisabeth was saying about, it reminded her of like what the Irish do, especially with working class cultures. There is a point, whether you're Black, whether you're this or that, the working class shares these things. And especially when it comes to the Catholic working class, even more things like that,
Liz, there's a passage you wanted to read on page 233. Can you read that for us and tell us what you think it reveals about the novel?
Yes. 3:56 p.m. There is a minute in the day, a minute for everyone, though most everyone is too distracted to notice its arrival. A minute of gifts coming from the world like birthday presents, a minute given to every day that seems to create a golden bubble available to everyone. But Big Angel could have missed it because he was sore and angry that he couldn't get out of bed. Jimbo did miss it because he had passed out. People on the freeway 5 miles from the party missed it because they were battling traffic and hating the Mexicans because talk radio told them it was all right because of ISIS and the border wall, and the Chargers had betrayed San Diego, and evangelicals were howling that sodomy was the new law of the land, and their favorite talk show hosts were unable to control any narrative anymore, and the drought was going to continue until all of California burned and vanished in dust, and the rivers in the West had turned yellow, or huge floods were on the way and nobody knew what to expect. I could go on, this whole passage continues on to the next page, but I'll pause there and just say this, although the paragraph kind of descends into a whole lot of the ugliness that we're living with in this country right now, even still, 3 years after this book came out, the first bit of the first sentence reminded me of Virginia Woolf's idea of the moment of being, that we occasionally have these kind of lightning bolts where we think something is happening right now. And if we actually pause and pay attention to those moments, our lives are richer for it. And in Big Angel's case, I think he started to realize that closer to the end of his life. But I think what just struck me as a middle-aged, relatively healthy person reading this is we have a choice whether or not to take notice of that moment in the day, but it does indeed exist, I think, for all of us.
And we have a choice at the end as to whether to get in bed with Big Angel or not. And it was such a glorious scene. What did you think, John?
I loved it. I mean, I really did love it. And I loved the way that it's foreshadowed by little Angel first getting in bed with Big Angel. So there's that first step of overcoming, some of those masculine prohibitions about acceptable, male to male intimacy, even among brothers, right? And it's sort of like, if you can get past that first step, then everybody's invited in. It's even more than, sharing a meal at a table. The intimacy of the bed, particularly the deathbed, I think is just so powerful.
How did you feel about it, Gustavo? Did it ring true?
Well, yeah, no, 1000%. I mean, this book came out 2018 while my mom was dying of cancer. And so it rang really, really, really close to home. And so that scene of the deathbed, of climbing into bed, I mean, that's basically how my mom died. My mom died surrounded in our living room on a couch, one of those couches where you could pull over like that. And she just finally passed away, surrounded by all of us. We couldn't climb in next to her, but you had just a parade of people over the past, that was in a very short time. I would have loved to have seen that even more extended, because when my mom got the diagnosis that she's being sent home to hospice, it was about a month. And it was like a freaking rose parade of people coming in. And again, it's sad. It was just I mean, she died young. She was 69 years old, died of ovarian cancer. But I will say this, at least she knew in her final days that she was loved, because she had hundreds of people coming in with audiences with her, and just no one wanted to be sad. So we weren't. So there was that joy. So even as you're climbing, even as Big Angel's he's dead at this point, but it's like, okay, there's a finality to it. Now we need to rejoice. Now let's give him a funeral that's even better than Mama America's funeral. And it happened. So it's like, you're super sad, but like, hey, life moves on. Life moves on, and you have to do it with a smile, because that's what life wants out of you.
I mean, that funeral for him was absolutely extraordinary. It made you cry. It made you laugh. This book, I totally agree with you, Elisabeth, should be in every 7th, 8th, or 9th grade classroom in the country, because we need to understand that we are all human, we are all alike. And this book teaches us so much. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Obviously, a special thanks to you, Gustavo Arellano, Liz Egan, and John Alba Cutler. You were wonderful.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to hear from Luis Alberto Urrea himself, he'll be joining me in a separate Zoom link for an interview about his background, career, and why he says he's more interested in writing about bridges than borders. You still have time to register for that at the link in the chat room. But before you go, please take a minute to fill out a short survey about this event. It will pop up on your screen, and you will see it and be able to give us your quick reactions to this discussion today. And our next meeting, I want to tell you, will be on Wednesday, October 27th. We'll discuss The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. This will also be followed by an interview with Ms. Lefteri herself about her experience working with Syrian refugees as well as her new novel, Songbirds. Our book club is produced by Allison Brody. Kennedy Wright is our engineer today. Yanlin Zhang is our events coordinator. We couldn't do this event without the support of Verendra Silva, Julia Slatterly, April Stevens, Lynn Kronberger, Brian Colombo, and Michelle Morgan. A very special thanks to all these people and to all of you who attended. I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye now.